Okay, guys, so sorry about that little interruption. So, to recap, we are talking about how we are built for adaptability, literally. All right, I am presenting a piece to you from Professor of Neuroscience named Bo Lotto. And, well, I'll just read it, it'll speak for itself. But before I do that, I just want to give you just a quick, in case you missed it from the short and you just come into this video, the three main things and takeaways I believe this author wants us to have is that reality is singular and we don't have access to it. We only have access to our perception of it. The other thing is adaptability is the essence of perspective. And lastly, we never really understand or know anything. So if you decide to pick up this book, you'll see that he makes mention of this all throughout, and it's pretty much the premise and all of the explanation around it. And then, in case you guys are just coming here and didn't see the short that I put out on the other channels, TikTok and Clapper, etc. Uh, it was like he has these illustrations. Let me just give you a good one. It was raining and windy earlier, so I couldn't really show you anything, and I won't show too much because I don't want to spoil the book. But this right here is just another one example and another, in case you saw the other video, of the way he wants to present this information. He doesn't just want to explain it with words. The purpose of these activities is so that we can get a sense of what adaptability is in a conscious way, rather than just living life and just hearing about it. He wants us to pay attention to the process he's describing. Well, at least that's what I got from it. So, Professor Lotto, if you're seeing this video, I hope I'm doing your work justice, okay? So without further ado, let me just go ahead and read the excerpt that I was talking about, and then I'll give you a little more of my opinion on it and blase split, and I'll let you guys go. Here we go. Oh, Lord, I don't know. Here we go. I was finna say, I know I ain't lose the page in the middle of the presentation. Come on, A-Maze. All right, here we go. The cerebral cortex is the outer part of the brain where our gray matter is located. It is the place where our senses and motor abilities meet, containing the brain tissues that allow us to have consciousness. So, our awareness, of course, consciousness, and then our ability to think and all that, right? But more importantly, for the sake of this video, he's talking about where it says our senses meet. So, our ability to smell and taste, right? And then motor abilities, our ability to move. So our ability to move and sense things, and the consciousness of it is one part of it, okay? Then the other part of it is the thalamus. Let me read what he says. The thalamus is a deep aggregation of cells in the middle of the brain, straddling the two cerebral hemispheres, and it plays an integral role in sensory perception, serving as an extremely assiduous executive assistant to the high-powered CEO that is the cortex. So, in other words, brain cells from the thalamus are responsible for the perception we get from the senses. Okay, guys. So they work together to help us be able to even be able to perceive of anything in the first place. Okay. Just for the sake of understanding, assuming the thalamus, just assuming that the thalamus cells failed you, if this is even possible, and all you had left was cells from the cerebral cortex, you would be in this world being able to smell stuff, but you wouldn't know what to make of it. You would just say, that's you may be knowing something going in your nose. You don't know if it stinks, you don't know if it smells good, because your ability to perceive is not wiring. In other words, you can touch a table, but I mean, you don't know what it's for. You don't really have that. You can't say, oh, this table is for my cup or to write on, because the thalamus part is corrupted. It's not connecting. It's not wiring with the cerebral cortex nerves. I mean, cells. Got it? So that's basically it. They need each other. So let me go on and read more. It says, what David Price and I discovered in my in vitro experiments with mice, however, revealed that this relationship is much more important. So he is comparing it to a marriage. But listen, he says the cortex and the thalamus represent one of the less common phenomenon inside the brain, a love story, okay? My goal was to study the mechanisms of brain plasticity. So I removed cells from both the cortex and the thalamus. I found that in early development, the cells could survive in isolation since the relationship between the two still wasn't firmly established or even important. They hadn't yet gotten to know each other. This is important because they actually hadn't formed interconnections. But later, further on in development, when I separated the cells from the two after they had connected, this caused heartbreak and isolation. In isolation, both cells from the cortex and the cells from the thalamus withered and died. Okay, guys, let me read a little more. From early development to late development, the cortical cells and the thalamic cells had adapted to each other and had, in essence, fallen in love, and so could no longer live without the other. Okay. In parentheses, he got like a lot of real life relationships, some functional, some not. But anyway, he goes on to say, what's even more fascinating is that their codependence begins at exactly the same time that they would have formed connections. Thus, when I removed the thalamic cells 3 days before they would meet a cortical cell and kept them in isolation, 3 days later they would start dying, unless I started adding growth factors released by the cortex, a substance required for cell growth. In other words, their love is faded. This means their relationship changes as development progresses, and these two parts of the brain become codependent and extremely social, each relying on the other to bathe it with growth factors. So if Purvis's work, Purvis is his mentor, okay, a professor, yeah, he's a neurobiologist, but I'll tell you more about him later. But anyway, if Purvis's work showed that the neuromuscular junction is a no-frills matchmaker, the cortex and the thalamus demonstrate the neural equivalent of all-consuming, can't live without you love. Okay, I'll tell you about that independent study a little later, or maybe another video, but let me stay to the point. It says, now we know that the time frames for neurological adaptability are as follows. The short term of learning, which we humans can compare to our childhood. Then you have medium term, that he calls development, all right? And then long term, evolution. You know, at some point in our lives, we want to evolve. So let me just keep going. He says, all three offer opportunities for adaptation of perception through the shaping and reshaping of the network that underpins behavior, which is a fundamental principle that unites all three and opens the way towards seeing differently. Minds match their ecology. Okay, so to sum all that up, guys, what he's saying is, to go back to the neurons, the cells from the cortex and the cells from the thalamus, once they reach a certain age, they need connection with each other or they'll die. If you separate them, once they've made a connection, they'll still die. So either way, they need each other, right? And in needing each other, they are building a relationship. And in that relationship, they are adapting, okay? In other words, adaptation is necessary for life and survival. So to bring it back to you and why this is important to you, it shows you that you are built for adaptation. Okay, you need it for survival. If you feel like you're suffering in any way, financially or whatever, or emotionally, however, in order to find a new way of perspective, you must adapt to the environment or the stimulus you're given. Whatever it is that you can't help, with the ability to adapt to it, you will survive. And once you survive that, you can create perspectives that work, okay? Because just think about it. Oh, I want to read more about this, but let me just say this. These cells are constantly working and rapidly firing off at times our mind can't conceive. All that he's describing is constantly happening right now within you, within me, etc. Everybody, right? And so with that being said, they not only do they need survival for each other, they need survival for you. You know, the cells in your cortex and your thalamus, they connect for you to be able to pick up a chair and say, "Ooh, this is a heavy chair." All that is happening all at once. You know, your ability to pick it up, your ability to feel how heavy it is, and your comes from the uh, cerebral cortex, but the thalamus part to support the cerebral cortex is the ability to say, I am tired from that. This is heavy. You see what I'm saying? It's your perception. Your perception comes from the thalamus part. So those two come together for a relationship. And in that relationship, they are adapting to each other. Why? So that you can be able to adapt to the world that you're in. See, the cells from the thalamus and the cells from the cerebral cortex are each other's world. They are each other's stimuli, each other's ecology. And they are adapting to the changes being made within their relationship. Okay. So that is what you do in your daily life. You adapt to the stimuli that you are provided with. You are in a relationship with it. And it's pretty simple. I mean, well, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it is simple. I mean, if you think of it that way, through and through to the cellular level, we are built for adaptation. So if you can adapt to something, especially something uncomfortable, you can make anything out of it if you want to. Don't lose faith in that. Here goes a little more evidence to show you that even your cells are prepared for you to do that. Now, let me just give you a little more information. I'll let him tell you. Ecology simply means the interactive relationship between things and the physical space in which they exist. It is a way of saying environment that better captures the fluid, inextricably connected nature of the things that occupy it. Since our ecology determines how we adapt and, in adapting, innovate, which means give and receive, and since adapting means our brains physically change, the logical conclusion is that your ecology actually shapes your brain. And here in parentheses, he says, and that your reshaped brain results in a change in behaviors that in turn shape your environment. Okay. But you guys know that. Let's keep going. It creates an empirical history of trial and error that molds the functional architecture of your cerebral tissues, and your neural tissue molds the world around it through the physical interactions of your body. You and all of your subsequent perceptions are a direct physiological manifestation of your past perceptual meanings. And your past is largely your interaction with your environment, and thus your ecology. It is precisely because, and not in spite of the fact that you do not see reality, that you are able to so fluidly adapt and change. Sit with this idea. Not seeing reality is essential to our ability to adapt. So remember, I gave y'all the three premises. This is one of them. He wants us to understand that reality is one thing in its own self, and it's something we have no access to. We just have access to our perception of reality, whatever that is. It's like it's its own thing. More to say about that is, that's basically it. The reason we're built down to the cellular level, if you just want to be scientific about it, our bodies are designed to adapt. And without us being able to do that, see, the thing is, with truth being the only thing there is, but we don't have access to it, we're built to just have access to perception, and that's it. There's no other way around it, okay? That's why we'll never ever understand. We can read as many books as we want. We can have as many adventures and life experiences. We can talk to as many wise people as we want and do as many experimentations as we want. But at the end, it'll always be questions, right? There's still always be questions. Even when we come up with factual things, you know, you hear scientists and doctors say things all the time about what they can't figure out. That doesn't mean it can't be figured out, but nonetheless, it's not figured out. And that's another way, a small microscopic way for me to demonstrate how there's no access to truth, just access to your ability to perceive truth. And it is complicated as it may sound, it's really simple. You know, nobody knows what's real, in other words. Nobody on earth knows what's real. But everybody can perceive something based on their life and tell you what they think is real. The only thing real to us is our perception, in other words. Everything you see and view is coming from your perception, and that's it. Okay. Yes, that's it. Let me read the last of this before I leave you guys. It says, since your brain is constantly occupied with the task of making sense of inherently meaningless information, and when he says that, that's what I was trying to remember to tell y'all. One of the premises of the book, when he says meaningless information, information is meaningless, he's pointing to just that. What I said about no access to truth, ultimate truth, just perception of truth. That means that only reason something means something is because we attach meaning to it. Okay, like the example of the pencil I gave, in case you guys didn't see the shorts that I put out. This right here, you know, if I'm conscious of this, but if I wasn't conscious of it, like if the thalamic cells shut down and it was possible to still go on without them, just for example, if that's even true or not, I would be aware of it. I see a stick, you know, but I you know, it's hard for me to say what it is, but since I have the ability to perceive, I can say, oh, this is a pencil, I'm supposed to write with it, you know what I'm saying? I can perceive this of something. It has no meaning without the ability to perceive. And then go on first, a white pencil, it's a nice pencil, all of that, perception. If you can't even imagine a world without perception, it's hard for me to describe to you what that is. But because that's all we see. You know, we're fish in the sea. Is a fish wet? To him, he may not be. Does he even know what wet is? So it says, this is what accounts for the miraculously plastic, protein, and evolvable nature of your mind. So change the environment and change your mind. That is the consequence slash importance of engaging with the world. So that's basically it. That is a detailed way to say that you need experience to learn. Be a new person. You know, this didn't come from nowhere. It's biblical. Romans 12:2 says, be ye renewed by... That ain't what it said. It said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Sound like somebody need to go do some transforming themselves. I'll see you next time.